Welcome! In this video, we'll take a look at types of errors in hypothesis testing. In every hypothesis testing, there is a chance of error. Hypothesis testing is a process to determine whether there is a sufficient evidence to support a particular hypothesis based on the data at hand. There are two statements, the null and alternative hypothesis, and there are two conclusions to draw, reject the null or fail to reject the null hypothesis. If we reject the null, then we have sufficient evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. On the other hand, if we fail to reject the null, then we do not have sufficient evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. Even though we may have tried our best to come to a decision, there is always the possibility of errors. These are known as type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 1 error occurs when we reject a null hypothesis when it was actually true. Conversely, type 2 error occurs when we fail to reject a null hypothesis, but it was actually false. The diagram shows all four cases, including the correct decisions. This table applies the two types of error in an example concerning the relationship between healthy and sick in a test. For example, you might be healthy, but if your test result shows positive, that is wrong since you are not actually sick. This is called a type 1 error and is also known as a false positive. This means it falsely shows positive. So what's wrong with this decision is that you are healthy but diagnosed as sick, which will lead to unnecessary treatment. In another case, you are sick and your test results show that you are positive or sick. This is correct and is referred to a true positive. In this case, you get the correct treatment. In another case, you are healthy and the test shows negative. This is a correct decision and is known as a true negative. For the last case, if you are sick but your test shows negative, this is a type 2 error and falsely shows negative. In other words, you are incorrectly diagnosed as healthy when you are actually sick. As a consequence, the disease has been ignored and you do not get treatment. Now let's take a look at a simple example. Let's say that a treatment such as a drug does not have an effect on lowering cholesterol, as the null statement. And the complement of the null hypothesis is as an alternative statement. The decision is either reject the null or fail to reject the null hypothesis. If H0 was rejected when it was actually true, then a type 1 error has occurred. On the other hand, if H0 was not rejected when it was actually false, then type 2 error occurred. Let's apply to the example. We will begin by focusing in the null is rejected case. If the null is rejected, then we have enough evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. The conclusion in this case would become, there is enough evidence to conclude that the treatment has an effect on lowering cholesterol. Therefore, the only possibility is a type 1 error. This means that if the treatment actually has no effect on lowering cholesterol, then our decision was a mistake. Next, we focus on the null is not rejected case. If the null is not rejected, then we do not have enough evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. Our conclusion becomes there is not enough evidence to conclude that the treatment has an effect on lowering cholesterol. Therefore, the only possible error is the type 2. In other words, if treatment actually has an effect on lowering cholesterol, then our decision was a mistake. Here's a funny picture summarizing the two types of error. I hope you are able to grasp the main concept. Questions, comments, and suggestions are all welcome. Thank you for watching and see you again in the next video.